Well, all you liberal brains out there are going to like this next interview. All you conservative brains out there, listen up. Chris Mooney's with us. Chris Mooney has written for Mother Jones, Harper's, Washington Post, Slate. Got a new post up in Salon.com on Monday. He is the best-selling author of The Republican War on Science and his latest book, The Republican Brain, The Science of Why They Deny Science and Reality. Website is republicanbrain.com. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Chris, loved your book, and I'm looking forward to this interview. And I want to say up front that about once a year on this show, I read portions of the 1956 Republican platform that Dwight Eisenhower ran on. It's almost a progressive document. I think it is, would be something we would write today as progressive. So when you say Republican brain, you're really kind of talking more about the conservative or authoritarian brain, right?
Sure, that would be true, yeah. But the Republican Party has become
Right.
a conservative authoritarian
Right.
party.
The Eisenhowers seem to be gone from that party now.
Well, there's some that are clinging on, but I think it's clear that they are a minority and they have very much lost the party.
Right. By the authoritarian brain, we mean a brain that's black and white, no ambiguity, no equivocation. You mentioned Phyllis Schlafly as a great example in the book, someone who her worldview was us versus them, good versus evil. It's kind of a George Bush, us versus them, you're with us or against us mentality, right?
Correct, yes. And we have a lot of evidence showing that the Republican base and, modern conservative movement is full of authoritarianism. And authoritarians don't compromise, and they're not that into digging nuance, which
Right.
is what liberals and scientists thrive on.
Right. You also quote Robert Altemeyer at the University of Manitoba in the book, and I love that you do. I remember having a dinner conversation at the ACLU Foundation years ago with John Dean about Altemeyer's work. Altemeyer, and you quote him in the book, authoritarians maintain their beliefs against challenges by limiting their experiences and surrounding themselves with sources of information that will tell them they are right. Now, all of us, Chris, are selective, have selective perception, selective attention, selective retention, but the studies would show that authoritarians are much more this way. Is that right?
Yeah, this is actually, I mentioned this in the context of talking about why Fox News viewers believe so many wrong
Right.
things.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, well, Fox clearly actively misinforms them in the sense that it puts out bad information about global warming, et cetera. But they're also probably selecting in. They probably have a need for affirmation of their beliefs because they're authoritarians, a stronger need than liberals have. And the research shows that liberals, sort of go grazing for different kinds of media much more.
Right.
The authoritarians go right to Fox,
And you point out, we're talking to Chris Mooney, the author of The Republican Brain, The Science of Why They Deny Science and Reality. And you point out in the book, Chris, that by the time Fox TV came on in '96, or Fox News, we had so much of talk radio, Rush Limbaugh, to kind of already lay out this sugar, as it was, for the conservative brain.
Oh, exactly. I mean, talk radio did the same thing that Fox then later did, which was to reaffirm the beliefs of conservatives. And, it's interesting. It's the more educated conservatives that opt in for this information and end up being more factually wrong.
Which would seem counterintuitive, but what do the studies show?
Right. They all show that there's an inverse relationship between education and belief in global warming if you're a conservative. Mm-hmm. And that's got to be largely opting into talk radio, opting into Fox News, and getting bad information. But I think it's also probably rigidity, in the sense that, if you're smart but rigid, which is very possible,
right.
then you're very good at reaffirming all the things you already think.
Right. So said another way, liberals much more open to new experiences. They're more curious, the liberal brain, than the conservative brain.
And less sure of themselves.
Right.
And more second-guessing.
Right.
Which is not good for leadership, I mean,
exactly right.
It can get in the way of being a decisive leader, and a decisive leader inspires confidence in people, and this is always a Republican strength.
Right. One of the probably one of the great leaders, certainly ranked always among the top presidents, was Franklin Roosevelt. If anything knows anything about FDR's style, it was that he would encourage competing arguments on the big issues among his cabinet officers and advisors and staff to see the debate. He wanted to see the debate.
Mm-hmm. Actually, his counterpart in World War II is an example of a conservative, Churchill, mm-hmm. who showed these these traits and actually turned out to be the right traits at the right time, which was being completely uncompromising and having only one focus, and it is black and white.
Well, Hitler's a little different than the individual mandate.
Right, of course. No, and so this is how this stuff is situational, and
Right.
they can be good in situations.
Right.
It's probably why it's part of human nature, okay? But it can completely misfire.
Our guest is Chris Mooney, author of The Republican Brain, The Science of Why We Deny Science and Reality. Read more at republicanbrain.com. Chris, one of the stories we talked about this week, on Monday, the Tennessee legislature passed a bill, the governor's going to sign it, that requires public schools to teach the controversy over evolution, global warming, human cloning, actually put those subjects in there. You have, as you mentioned, maybe educated conservatives still not accepting the science of climate change or evolution or stem cell research, or believe an educated conservative that Barack Obama is a Muslim or not born in the United States. What is going on in that brain?
Well, conservatism is defined by political scientists as resistance to change. And I'm saying that this is rooted in the psychological resistance to change, wanting to keep doing the same thing, living life in patterns. And if there's ever been a pattern, it's been people who are conservative across eras and time denying evolution. All right, this is 100 years old, 150 years old.
Right.
All right, and they had the Scopes trial. I forget the year, something like
1925. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's about we're going to repeat this 80 years later.
Right.
That's conservatism. That's resistance to change, right there.
Maybe it's even additional comfort that this is a Tennessee bill.
It's
in the same state.
Yeah. No, but with anti-evolutionism, we play whack-a-mole. It pops up state by state by state, and it gets fought in different states, and then it goes to court in different states, but it never goes away.
Chris, what are some of the interesting studies? You can talk about brain scans or psychological testing. Give me an example of one in the book that comes to mind.
I'm really interested now in these studies where they basically actually look at the eye gaze patterns when they show liberals and conservatives different kinds of images. And, you can't control this. They've got an eye tracker, and you're not even aware of what your eyes are doing.
Right.
So the conservatives go really, really fast to the images of fear that evoke fear and threat, and the liberals don't go as fast. And the conservatives stay longer on those images, and the liberals are like more likely to look at a cute bunny or a beach ball or something like that. So I mean,
but actually, the authoritarian brain sees, and in some cases, facts, or they interpret facts as threats, right?
They can. I mean, if they're told that a fact is a threat. So, for example, global warming or evolution. I have not seen a study that does this, but I will bet you that if you run the same study with eye gaze but with words, and you put the word evolution up, then you're gonna see a big reaction, right? But that's because they've learned that.
Right.
In a different context, if their leaders were telling them that it was fine, then I don't think that would happen. And this is why this is always a combination of culture and nature.
Right. Our guest, Chris Mooney. Chris, you have a post op at salon.com on Monday. And essentially, tell us about the professor, I believe, at the University of North Carolina who has talked about, conservative think tanks, the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, Fox News, giving a counter experience, if you will, to built up as an alternate reality to science and academia, which was considered liberal.
I really appreciated that this researcher, Gordon Goshat,
yeah.
His name right. He actually undertook to test the thesis of my first book, The Republican War on Science, 2005, and he proved me right. Oh, it's not a good thing to be right about, but he proved me right with a new set of data, which was showing that trust in science had plummeted among conservatives across 3 decades. And no one had broken out the data from the General Social Survey in this way. So it was right over the time period I was talking about. They trusted science less. So that's a good, strong confirmation. And then he talked about why this would occur. And he said, well, this is the same period where the conservative movement was creating its think tanks. It was essentially creating its own experts so that they could argue back against academia. Conservatives also then created their own media so that they could quote the experts and have them on. So
right, it's a holistic approach, right?
So no wonder they don't trust academics anymore. They think they're right and academics aren't. They think academia is a liberal haven. But that is an entirely sociological explanation, and it's true. It's true, but as I go on to say, well, there's also a psychological explanation that goes along with it. that we have to take into account.
Chris, the other day, in fact, it was yesterday, I was talking about the racist element within the Republican Party. I mean, historically, since Johnson signed the civil rights legislation of the 1960s and the movement of conservatives to the Republican Party in the South, we had a very angry caller who said I was calling him a racist. He wasn't a racist. There are no racists in the Republican Party. Is it part of the makeup of the authoritarian brain that they will not face a mirror?
This is tough. All right. I mean, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of research showing that if you have either explicit or implicit racial bias, for example, in the 2008 election, then you are much more likely to be a McCain voter than an Obama voter. Mm-hmm. There is research on this.
Right.
And, it makes...
What about recognizing that you have those traits within you, whether it's the authoritarian mindset or racism or whatever?
Well, I don't think that this mindset is greatly given to introspection.
No.
I mean, I think that goes without saying. This is about being very decisive, very firm. You're either with me or against me.
And you're not into curiosity as much. You're not into new experiences. And we know, stereotypes break down with human experience. If they're less prone to have experience, obviously less likely those stereotypes will break down.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hate to say it, but, there's a strong connection between the emotion of fear and conservatism and distrust of difference.
Right.
And it's all kind of part of a package. And black and white, you're either with me or against me.
Right.
It's not to say all conservatives are racist, but there is a relationship.
Right. Have any prominent Republicans read your books, and if so, what have they said about them?
Well, Republican War on Science definitely got some criticism, including from I believe it was a couple members of Congress. It's hard to remember now. But Republican Brain is new, and I don't know what the reaction is going to be. I'll tell you what, so far, I am blessed by incompetent critics in the sense that they're attacking it without reading it, which is, I'm like, okay, well, you can say that, but it's wrong, and it isn't what I said.
Well, it's in concert with what's happening. I think it was Bill Maher who said last month that the Republicans are running against a mythical president. I mean, they're claiming that Obama, raised taxes and did all these things that he didn't do.
No, the case against Obama is entirely built on misinformation. I mean, basically Obama inherited a very bad situation, and it wasn't his fault, and he did the best he could, and you could second-guess some things. But he didn't cause the disaster, and if the case against him is that he caused the disaster, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
So, but if you define Obama as the enemy and the out-group and liberals as the out-group, and by the way, there's some research that suggests that conservatives might actually feel the emotion of disgust towards liberals.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so, if you define them in this radical way, then it's much easier to believe bad things about them.
Hey, Chris, very enlightening. I wish I could talk to you all morning. I know you got to go for another interview. Our guest, Chris Mooney, the author of The Republican Brain, The Science of Why They Deny Science and Reality. Very important book, very important subject, republicanbrain.com. Chris, thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.